In today's video, I want to talk about living in Germany versus living in Sweden. Which country is better for you? I know this is quite subjective because, well, I'm just a human with my own experiences, but in today's video, I try to be fairly objective so you can decide for yourself which country is better for you to live in. Hopefully at the end of this video you will know. I'm making this video because I'm often asked to compare different countries, and since I'm from Germany and I have lived in the UK, I try to make some comparison videos, and today it will be Germany versus Sweden. And if you make sure to subscribe to my channel and grab your ebook to know if Sweden is the right fit for you, the link is in the description down below. Let's get started. If you're new to my channel, I was born and raised in Germany, and then 3 years ago I moved to Sweden. I live here now with my British partner and our 2-year-old and 5-year-old daughters. Grab a cup of coffee because this video might be a little bit long, but it has all the details you need to know. Let's start about cost of living in Germany and in Sweden. So in Germany, of course, in general, it always depends on where you live. Do you live in a city or in the countryside? In cities, obviously, it's always more expensive than in the countryside. And then it also depends on how close a nearby town is. But I tried to find a little bit a comparison, and I chose Berlin and Stockholm, the probably most expensive cities, although Berlin is not the most expensive city in Germany. But I would still say the prices are rising because it's quite popular to move to. And Stockholm is obviously the biggest city here in Sweden, and is also the most expensive one. And basically I looked first of all at like an apartment in Berlin and also an apartment in Stockholm to buy, to see what the differences or similarities are. And I have to say, I found similar apartments, like the size was similar to each other. Both are very central to their own city. The one in Stockholm is in Södermalm, and in Berlin it's Prenzlauer Berg. It's also very central. And both had one bedroom, one living room, a bathroom, and a balcony. And a kitchen, of course. And I found that actually they are very close in price. I think the Stockholm one was a little bit cheaper, if I'm not mistaken. But at the same time, I found that the bedroom was a little bit smaller as well. And then I tried to compare a little bit rental price, but this time not in the cities, but more in the countryside, to see if I can see any differences there. And I actually chose my home village to see what the prices are there, and I found like an apartment for 730 euros, which I thought, I wasn't sure if that's actually expensive or not. But then I also came across another video here on YouTube about an Italian guy who moved to the north and rented a house for 400 euros, which I thought, wow, that is definitely such a difference, an apartment versus a house. But then here's the difference with Sweden and Germany. First of all, Germany has more inhabitants, around 80 million people, and Sweden has around 10 million people. In Germany, there's so many cities and bigger cities as well. And of course, there are also villages, but I found in Sweden, a lot is concentrated in the south. And then you have a bit of the middle where also Stockholm lies. And then you go up the north, and of course, there are less bigger cities and less people in general. So for example, if you live up in the north in Sweden, it is so much cheaper, both in rental properties but also buying properties. So I couldn't really compare it with Germany because in Germany you don't have like a very remote area. You can live in the countryside, of course, but there's normally always a nearby town quite close. So that's a bit of a difference in terms of living, and then it was a bit hard to really compare prices. So I can't say Germany is more expensive or Sweden is more expensive because it really depends where you live, especially in Sweden, in the north. It's such a difference to German areas. But again, that's why I tried to compare Stockholm and Berlin, and there it is actually quite similar. Then in terms of groceries and, things you buy on a daily basis, I would have said Germany is much cheaper than Sweden, But things have changed, with the circumstances. There was the pandemic and then also the Ukraine war. All these things kind of contribute that things are getting more expensive. And I'm not even distinguishing between towns and countryside, because when I visit my parents in the countryside, I feel the prices already are higher than usually. So I would say maybe Germany is still slightly cheaper, but in general, I would say they're very similar to each other. And then I also tried to compare transportation, and that was also a little bit tricky because, there are normally different circumstances when you buy a ticket. I tried to figure out what a train from Hamburg to Berlin costs, and then also from Stockholm to Gothenburg. Stockholm-Gothenburg is 3 hours and Hamburg-Berlin is 2 hours. So kind of similar, but still not the same distance. Well, and in general, I found that actually in Sweden, transportation costs are slightly cheaper, which was also a surprise to me because I've never really compared it to Germany. But yeah, the train tickets were a little bit cheaper. And also when you are in a town like Stockholm or Berlin, in Stockholm, you actually have one ticket, and that is 3.70 euros. And then in Berlin, you have different zones. You have, zone 1 and 2, which is central, and then you have other zones. And then you can also buy a very short trip ticket, which is only 3 stops, and that was cheaper. But yeah, so it's actually a little bit more complicated in Berlin. But in total, I found that again, Stockholm was slightly cheaper than Berlin in terms of transportation. Okay, now we come to work-life balance. Sweden is very well known for their work-life balance. I have talked about it in some videos of mine. I cannot really talk from experience because I have my own business, so I don't really work in a company. I can take more what my partner is telling me. And then also I try to find more statistics, but then the statistics actually say that Germany is better in work-life balance than Sweden, which also surprised me a little bit. I kind of can only really compare it to the UK where my partner works, and he definitely worked much more there, like longer hours than here in Sweden, although it is really busy and sometimes he has to work late. In general, I would say he still comes home at a decent time, although I always wish it would be a bit earlier, but that's okay. And I think it really depends on your job in general and what kind of industry you work. For example, the film industry is quite, full on. I think in Germany you also work more hours. And actually I worked as a freelancer in the film industry a little bit, or advertising, where they made, advertising films. I don't know what you call them. Ads you find on TV and stuff like that. And it was sometimes crazy because you always worked on a project, and in that project you worked like very long hours. And when you returned to your normal hours, you worked your normal hours, but you didn't reduce your normal hours, if that made sense. So I know it can be actually quite stressful working in Germany, long hours. And I heard every now and then from others, again, it's more like in the advertising industry that you can also work long hours there, and it can be quite stressful. So it really depends what kind of industry you choose. In Sweden, is quite well known for their work-life balance. They always try to not work, crazy like hours after your normal work time, just because they value family time and their private life quite a lot. So in general, I would say they have quite similar work-life balances, Germany and Sweden. And then in terms of vacation time, so legally, I think in Germany, it's from like 20 days. So the usual amount is 20 to 30 days during 1 year. And in Sweden, it's similar. It starts with 25 days and can go up, of course, depending on, what you agreed with your employer, but also what is in your contract and how many years you work in a company. So again, it's quite similar. I know that what's very special here in Sweden is that a lot of people are taking like 4 or 5 weeks off during the summer, just because the summer is so magical. So it is really quiet here in the summertime in terms of like people working. So that's maybe quite a difference, that the summers are very sacred in Sweden and everyone is off and taking their majority of vacation time during the summer, but the number of days are very similar. And in terms of work culture, again, it depends a little bit maybe what kind of industry you work in. I worked in PR in Germany, for example. I was an apprentice, but we didn't have that many like social gatherings. There was once a week a breakfast on a Monday where we sat together, but we didn't really go out to a bar after work. And obviously there was an occasional like event happening, for example, celebrating Christmas. And here in Sweden, again, I don't have personally like experienced anything. I can only refer really to my partner. But they do have quite a few things. They go out, to a bar every now and then after work, and he is not attending enough of them because of his family life. So obviously when you have a family, you are maybe less likely to go out after work. But in general, there is definitely things like that here in Sweden, although sometimes people complain about it. But again, it depends on what kind of industry you work in. And I think, social media agencies or advertising agencies, film industry, production agencies and stuff like that, where it is quite a dynamic kind of environment. They do tend to have social gatherings, after work or occasionally, come together and do something together out of, work. And let's talk about job opportunities. Well, at the moment, it looks really, bad in general. Getting a job, it's not that easy, again, circumstances after the pandemic and, wars going on. And, there's maybe always something, a recession. But in general, of course, Germany is much bigger, has more cities, more people, more companies than Sweden. Sweden is smaller. So I would say maybe the job opportunities are higher in Germany just because of the number. But then again, Sweden is like a little bit of a tech hub as well. A lot of tech companies are here, startups, new companies. So there are definitely opportunities. I guess it really depends in which area you need to look for a job. In terms of language, it's probably also similar. The bigger the company, or if it is a startup, English is probably absolutely fine. My partner found also a few jobs in Germany 3 years ago, but we decided to move to Sweden. But they are obviously also the company language was English. And you have the same here in Sweden, where some companies, their company language is English. So it's absolutely fine if you don't know Swedish or German. And then parental leave. I talked about parental leave quite a bit here on my channel because I have experienced it here in Sweden. I have not experienced it in Germany. But anyways, I tried to find out a few information. And actually, parental leave is still much better here in Sweden. And I'm trying to find a few information and give you a few numbers. But in general, you have a longer period in Sweden to actually have parental leave than in Germany. Then also very interesting is that 3 months are dedicated to each parent. So they have to kind of take 3 months each. Otherwise, this will expire and it can't be transferred to the other parent. So that means that fathers are actually kind of forced to take at least 3 months here parental leave in Sweden. Otherwise, it goes to nothing, and if they don't use it, then they don't have the opportunity to spend, paid leave, basically. And then also in terms of numbers, you get actually much more money here in Sweden. I think you get 80% of your salary, and the cap, is also higher. So obviously, if you earn a lot of money, it will not be 80%. I think the highest is 3,000 euros per month. That's the cap, and then you get basically 80% of it. And I think in Germany, the maximum you could actually get was 1,800 euros per month, and normally it's 67% of your salary if it doesn't exceed 1,800 euros per month. And I think the length is also a little bit different. You get more time, more months in Sweden than in Germany. I think it is 60 months in Sweden and about 12-14 months in Germany. Let's talk about education. I'm going to whiz through this a little bit because I have talked a little bit about education in one of my videos here on my channel, and I compared it to Germany, so I went into more details into that. But in general, school starts from like 6-7 years old, and that's very similar. The school system might be a little bit different, but again, I talk about this in my other video, which I will link down below. And then the quality of education, I would say, is fairly similar in both countries, in Germany and in Sweden. Of course, the approach is a little bit different, and you go to school at least until you're 15-16 years old. I think in Germany, the minimum is 15 years. And actually in Sweden, I'm not 100% sure. I think think it is at least 16 years, but let me know in the comments down below. School is also free in Germany as well as in Sweden. As I mentioned in one of my videos, you have private and public schools in Sweden and they're both free. And normally in Germany you go to a public school. I think you can go to a private school, of course you can, but that costs money for sure. So that's a little bit of a difference. And then also jumping back to kindergarten, which is also kind of education. Both is very similar. I think you pay a similar price, which is about 100, 200 euros per month per child. So it's very similar. So kindergarten in both countries is pretty good. And when it comes to university in Sweden, it is free to go to university. And in Germany, you do pay a fee, but it's also very low. So both countries, you cannot really compare with the US or the UK, where you really pay a high fee to go to university. It's very different in those countries. And in terms of like access, you do need a certain degree. I have graduated, I think it's like an A-level kind of thing to enter a university, but also in Germany you have to have a certain grade for certain studies. And in Sweden it is more that you have to have an entry test and you have to demonstrate some skills. Whatever university you want to go to or whatever you want to study, you need to do a test. Not always, but in some universities it's the case. So in conclusion, I would say that both countries are very similar in their educational system. I think where the difference is more into the details, what they teach and how they teach, maybe more how actually. And then again, I'm not going into details about this in this video because it would be too long, but maybe there is a little bit of a difference. Healthcare. Let's talk about healthcare because it's actually quite different in both countries. I would say the quality of healthcare is quite similar. I think Germany is a wonderful country. You don't have to worry about it. There are good doctors. Of course, you can always have a bad doctor in like very single cases, but in general, the health system is really good. And in Sweden, it's actually the same as well. But healthcare is not free in Germany and it is free in Sweden. And the system basically works that normally when you are employed in Germany, a portion of your salary goes to your health insurance before you actually get the net money. So you have to basically pay monthly to your insurance to then use that when you go to the doctor. And in Sweden, it is like a general healthcare. All you need is your personnummer really to go to the doctor and they document, what your problems are. I think there is a little bit of a fee you pay and that's basically like 20 euros or something when you go to a doctor. But then if you have to go to the doctor many times during a year, then there is a cap as well. And I think it's just 250 euros. So you only pay 250 euros a year to go to the doctor. And when it comes to medicine, there's also a cap. Actually, I lied. It's even cheaper than that. It's 124 euros for going to the doctor a year. And when it comes to medicine and it exceeds 250 euros a year, then also healthcare, the government takes care of that and pays for it. The only difference is actually dentists. So you do pay for dentists in Sweden, and obviously that could be a little bit more expensive. And in Germany, it's normally included. At least there are certain things your insurance pays for as well. Only if there's very specific things, you might have to pay part of, the costs of it. But in general, the dentist is included in your insurance in Germany, and the dentist in Sweden, you have to pay extra for it. But exceptions are kids. So kids in Sweden are fully, covered. The dentist, the doctors, you don't have to pay anything for your kids until they're 18 in Sweden. And as far as I know, in Germany, it's the same. Normally, your children are insured through your insurance. You don't have to pay extra for it though, but yeah, they are basically insured through you. And yeah, maybe you're asking yourself, what if you're unemployed in Germany? Then there is kind of the same system. You normally get like a certain amount from your from the government, and they will basically insure you through their systems, and so you're technically like you are insured to go to the doctor. So that is taken care of in Germany. Let's talk a bit about the language, like learning German versus learning Swedish. And of course, I don't know if I can talk about it because obviously I learned German since I was a little child, and now I'm learning, Swedish as a foreigner. But I would say that German is a little bit harder to learn in terms of grammar. We have a bit more rules, while Swedish is quite similar to English, so the grammar rules are quite simplified compared to Germany or compared to German. And then there's the question, do you need German or do you need Swedish? And as I mentioned before, there are companies where the company language is English, so you don't really need German or Swedish. And in the day-to-day life, I would say it might be a bit harder in Germany with English because not everyone speaks English. Sweden is a little bit better, how they learn English. It's a little bit better, I would say, here in Sweden, and that's why normally everyone can speak English and fairly well, even if they think they are not that good in English. Their English is normally pretty good. So you have a bit of an advantage in Sweden if you only speak English, but there's still experts happily living in Germany only speaking English. And then one word about learning German or Swedish. I have researched a little bit, and I know from my own research here in Sweden, there is a free course where you can just go physically to a class and learn Swedish, which is pretty amazing, I have to say. In Germany they don't offer something like that, maybe under specific circumstances, but there's not an overall free course for everyone who comes to Germany. So you have to really do your own research and find something or pay for it. So yeah, that is also a little bit of a difference. It is easier maybe for free to learn Swedish. Let's talk about the weather. So maybe the weather is a decisive factor if you want to move to Germany or to Sweden. Although again, I find there's a little bit of a difference in Sweden, because if you look at the map, Sweden is very long, and if you live in the south or even Stockholm area, the weather is actually not too bad. Only if you go up to the north, then it could be quite a significant difference between Germany and Sweden. But yeah, in Germany you have all 4 seasons, normally around 3 months. You have spring, you have summer, autumn and winter. You have more snow in the winter, so normally it's more in the south of Germany where you can also go skiing. In the north of Germany it's quite flat, and normally you don't have that much snow, or maybe no snow at all. And then Sweden, I have talked about the Swedish weather as well if you want to check out some videos in more detail, but you do have the seasons as well. But it seems that the winter is slightly longer than in Germany, so it's a little bit longer cold, like April normally when spring starts in Germany. I would say it can be still snowing here, and I'm really talking more about the Stockholm area because I think snow will be still in May up north in Sweden. And I guess it's not only about the coldness or the winter, it's also about the darkness here in Sweden, and that is very particular for Sweden compared to Germany. Germany doesn't really have that. But yeah, in winter you get a little bit less light. It can get dark already around 3 p.m. and then you get the next sun maybe in the morning at 8, 9 a.m. So some people really, really hate that. I have to say, if you make the most out of, the time where the sun is out, and the sun is out quite a lot here, I would say, at least in the Stockholm area, you have to make the most out of it and get out during the day and get some vitamin D through the sun. You just have to basically make sure to take care of yourself, and then it is not that of a big deal, I would say. But then I only have been living here for 3 years, so I don't know if it will have an impact if I live many, many more years in Sweden. But yeah, if you want to have a milder kind of climate, maybe Germany would be a little bit better, although there are Germans also complaining about the winter. So either way, if you're coming from a country like Australia, Sweden and Germany might be similar, and you do have proper cold winters here in Europe. So you have to think about that. Let's talk a little bit about lifestyle or also nature. And I feel there is a big difference between Germany and Sweden. Maybe it's just my perspective. Of course, you can do a lot of outdoor activities in both countries. We also have mountains, the Alps, and in Germany in the south. Although near Berlin it is more flat, so you don't really have mountains at all, maybe some hills. And here in Sweden, you can also, you also have a lot of mountains and you can go skiing, snowboarding, whatever. But I think you have more possibilities in Sweden because it's a little bit bigger. In Germany, you kind of crossing the border of Austria, and I think there's more possibilities in Austria to go skiing and, snowboarding than in Germany. So I would say the points go to Sweden if you are, into winter sports. But what I really love in Sweden is that there are so many lakes. There's so much water. I mean, I live in Stockholm. There is the sea, and also a lot of different lakes around Stockholm. That is definitely such a difference to any German area I know. There's obviously, you have a little bit of a sea in the very north of Germany, which is obviously cool, but in Sweden it's everywhere. And I don't know, I feel that it's such a bonus to, your own life, to have so much nature, so much water around you. I really, really enjoy it. I mentioned it in many of my videos. I love going to beaches, explore Sweden and the Stockholm area a little bit, where there are many, many beaches and islands. Of course, there's also many islands you can visit, and it just looks so beautiful. And honestly, you don't have that in Germany. Of course, there are beautiful areas in Germany, beautiful nature in Germany, but not, the amount of it is not as present as it is here in Sweden. And I think in Germany, you really have to maybe drive somewhere to see something or to enjoy like really beautiful places. And here in Sweden, you often have it in front of you, at your doorstep. Or you just cycle like 5-10 minutes and then you have a beautiful lake and a beach, and actually many beaches, as I mentioned in my video. So I don't know, maybe it's just me finding that so amazing. I don't know, but I really, really love it here in Sweden, and it's a difference to Germany. Social life and making friends. Is Germany easier to make friends or Sweden? I talked about social life in Sweden quite a bit, but is Germany actually better? And to be honest, I don't know if I also objectively can answer that question, because obviously I was born and raised in Germany. So I made friends there, in normal ways, maybe with my German language. I have no ideas. Growing up, I made friends, of course. But then I tried to figure out a little bit, what other people say about Germany. And, especially on YouTube, I just typed in making friends in Germany, for example. You can do the same. And the first videos which pop up is like, it's horrible. Like, social life, in Germany is horrible. It's really hard to make friends. And I was thinking, maybe it's the same in Sweden. At least that's, I don't know if it's really my personal opinion. Although at the same time, I haven't put like super effort into making Swedish friends. I made friends. Some of them are, I did mention that most of my friends are not particularly Swedish, although I'm also, talking regularly and even like come and visit each other with my Swedish neighbors. So I would say I made, acquaintances and, friendships with Swedes, even if we don't see each other every week. Although we do see each other and say hello and have small talks, because neighbors, you're always there, kind of. Anyways, I don't really know if it is harder in Sweden or in Germany to make friends. I think it really depends where you live, what kind of, neighbors you have, and also what kind of person you are. Just because you are very outgoing and like very, I don't know, loud, or you want to have friends, doesn't make it easier sometimes, because people sometimes, don't like loud people. So that's why I understand that, those people complain sometimes the loudest, they can't make friends, but then they also have very particular character. I don't know. I'm just speculating here right now. I think in both countries it's possible, I talked about it, maybe through joining a club or having a hobby, or through your kids, like to make friends. Maybe it takes a little bit longer. That's true. I think in both countries it might take a little bit longer, because both of the countries, like the people are a little bit more suspicious, or, you know, have maybe different reasons. Maybe Germans are more suspicious and Swedes just value the personal space a little bit more, and therefore, you know, don't want to get in your way. And maybe then it takes also a little bit longer to get to know them. And I think because I'm a German who moved to Sweden, like, I didn't think it was such a big, you know, shock, like the social life here, maybe for other countries, you know, maybe Americans or maybe Italians, I don't know, maybe they have a harder time, you know, with meeting friends, or the timeline of meeting friends maybe it cannot be fast enough for them to make some friends. So maybe they perceive it a little bit different than I perceive making friends here in Sweden, and maybe it's the same in Germany. Last but not least, I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, you know, bureaucracy and you know, maybe also taxes and, you know, stuff like that in different countries, because you are quite interested in that when you move to a country. I definitely researched a little bit, like, how much tax do we pay in Germany when we get a salary there, and how much tax do we pay in Sweden. And I was under the impression and I was quite shocked when I researched that you pay more taxes at a certain, you know, amount in Germany. So you do pay actually more taxes in Germany at a certain amount than in Sweden. But then I kind of researched it again for this video, and I couldn't confirm what I researched 3 years ago. So I'm not sure what I found actually. But at the end of the day, I always found that you pay a little bit more tax here in Sweden than in Germany. So yeah, maybe you're actually off a little bit better in Germany than in Sweden in terms of taxes. But also in Germany, it depends a lot, like, you know, what kind of tax bracket you are in. And I think there's 6 different ones. And it's quite simple in Sweden, where it doesn't really matter if you're married, if you're a single person, if you have children. All that doesn't really matter in Sweden. It depends on how much money you make and where you live in Sweden. And that's kind of about it. But the difference is also, which doesn't really affect you in Sweden, the company pays tax for you as well, on top of you paying tax to the government. That is a little bit crazy, and that's especially crazy, I guess, also for the companies. So they pay a lot of more taxes in general, but at the same time, I guess you do have, you know, the expenses. Basically, this is an expense to the company. But still, it's quite crazy, I find, that you pay as a business so much tax. And the same applies to me. I'm self-employed. I have my own business. So if I pay myself, I not only pay as an individual person taxes, but me as a company have to also pay more taxes on top of that. So yeah, but there's a lot of details into it, which I cannot talk about this now in this video, because it's just, you know, makes the video even longer. And then in terms of bureaucracy, I still would say the waiting times are a little bit crazy, but the complexity, I think, is probably higher in Germany. And I did a little bit of research for this video, and then I found out that there's actually a museum in Germany, which kind of like shows the bureaucracy in Germany. And I can show you a few pictures. I just thought that was super funny. So I think actually bureaucracy might be a little bit more intense in Germany than in Sweden. Although it was a little bit, you know, struggling, or even now when we have to have a new work permit, or, you know, we want to do a new passport and stuff like that. So it can take a little bit of time. But yeah, bureaucracy is never really amazing in any country. If you know a country where bureaucracy is super simple and you have short waiting times, let me know. Maybe we should move there next. That was my video today comparing Germany with Sweden. I think it was quite a long comparison, but hopefully very detailed. So at the end, which is now, you know if you think Germany is better to move to or Sweden is better to move to. Let me know in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next video. Hey do und tschüss.